On my daughter's birthday, I found her cake in the trash, my sister Sneered. I was standing in the corner of the party room with a paper plate in my hand when it happened. The moment that still burns in my mind like a bad movie I can't shut off. My name is Linda. I'm 34 and all I wanted was for my daughter's 7th birthday to be a happy memory for her. Pink balloons, princess party hats, a unicorn cake she'd been talking about for weeks. The whole deal. But as I walked toward the dessert table to get her a slice, I noticed the cake was missing. At first, I thought one of the staff at Chuck E. Cheese had moved it to the back to cut it. Then I saw it in the trash can, face down, completely destroyed. And my sister Vanessa was standing right there, leaning against the arcade machine like she owned the place, scrolling through her iPhone with that smug half-smile she reserves for moments she knows will hurt. I asked her what happened, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. She didn't even look up from her phone, just shrugged and said, she didn't deserve it anyway. Like it was a joke. Like my daughter's birthday cake being thrown away was some kind of moral lesson she needed to teach. I felt my stomach twist, a mix of anger and disbelief. My daughter Emma was across the room playing skee-ball with her little friends from 2nd grade, completely unaware that her special moment had just been trashed, literally. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stare at Vanessa, trying to process what I'd just heard. I asked her again, slower this time, if she had something to do with it. She finally looked up, rolled her eyes, and said, "Relax, Linda. It's just cake." It wasn't just cake. It was the look on Emma's face when she'd been telling everyone at school about her birthday party for the last month. It was the fact that I had spent my entire Saturday morning decorating this place because no one else in the family offered to help. It was the way Vanessa had been taking little shots at me all day. Comments about how some people go overboard, or it's not that deep, she's just a kid. And now this. I could feel every muscle in my body tense up. I didn't want to start a scene with kids running around the arcade. So I went over to Emma, told her we were leaving early, and packed up what little was left of the party favors. I texted the other parents, made some excuse about her feeling sick, and got us out of there before Vanessa could say anything else. The drive home in my Honda Civic was quiet. Emma was clutching the unicorn figurine that came with a cake topper, asking why everyone had to go home early. I told her we'd have our own little party later, just the two of us, and we'd get a new cake from the Publix bakery. She smiled, which somehow made me feel both relieved and even angrier at the same time. Relieved because she was okay, but angry because she shouldn't have had to be. That night, I sat in my living room long after she went to bed, staring at my phone, waiting for anyone, in my family to call and ask what happened. No one did. But the next morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. She didn't ask about Emma. Didn't apologize. Didn't even acknowledge what had happened. Her voice was shaky, but not with guilt, with panic. "Linda," she said, "I need you to talk to the venue before they cancel Vanessa's wedding." I just sat there stunned, the phone pressed to my ear. She was calling me about Vanessa's wedding. Less than 24 hours after my daughter's birthday had been ruined at Chuck E. Cheese. I asked her if she was seriously not going to say anything about what happened yesterday. She went quiet for a moment and then said, "Look, I know Vanessa can be harsh sometimes, but this is her big day coming up and we can't have any drama with the Marriott." Something inside me snapped at that moment. It wasn't just yesterday. It was every Thanksgiving where Vanessa's preferences came first. Every Christmas photo where she got to be in the center because she's 3 years older. Every time I'd been told to just let things go for the sake of peace. My jaw tightened as Mom kept talking about deposits and deadlines and how the event coordinator at the Marriott was threatening to cancel because Vanessa hadn't paid the balance yet. She wanted me to call, smooth things over, maybe even cover the cost until Vanessa sorted things out with her credit cards. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just told her I had to think about it and hung up. Then I sat there for a long time staring at Emma's little My Little Pony toys scattered across the floor, feeling this strange calm settle over me. For years, I'd been the one to keep things running smoothly in this family. To fix things when Vanessa messed up, to be the reasonable one. But now, I wasn't sure I wanted to fix anything. And that's when the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting maybe an Amazon delivery, maybe a neighbor. Instead, it was Dad standing there with his arms crossed, looking irritated like I'd personally inconvenienced him just by existing. He didn't even say hello, just brushed past me into the living room like he owned the place. "We need to talk about Vanessa's wedding," he said, glancing at the toys on the floor like they were some sort of offense. I just stood there for a moment, still processing the fact that the man who hadn't once checked on his granddaughter after yesterday's disaster was now in my living room to talk about money for his favorite child's big day. I asked him straight out if he knew what happened at Emma's party. He shrugged, literally shrugged, like he was talking about the weather forecast. Kids bounce back, he said, waving a hand dismissively. What matters now is making sure your sister's wedding doesn't turn into a disaster. That word, disaster, hit me harder than I expected, because to him that's what Emma's ruined birthday was. Just noise, just an inconvenience. He sat down on my couch like he was preparing for a lecture and started explaining how the Marriott had called him too. How they were concerned about payment and threatening to cancel if they didn't get the balance by Friday. He leaned forward, looked me right in the eye, and said, "You're good with people, Linda. You always smooth things over. Can't you just take care of this? You make decent money as a nurse. It's nothing to you." There it was. The unspoken family rule said out loud. Linda fixes things. Linda sacrifices. Linda makes it right because she can. I asked him why Vanessa wasn't taking care of her own wedding bill. And he sighed like I was being dense. She's under a lot of stress, he said. Planning a wedding is expensive. She's had to cut back her hours at the law office. I reminded him that Vanessa had chosen to cut her hours at the law firm to focus on wedding planning, which mostly consisted of spa days with her bridesmaids, something she posted about constantly on Instagram. He ignored that, changed the subject, and started talking about how this wedding is important for the family's reputation and how people will talk if it gets cancelled. That's when Emma walked into the room, still in her frozen pajamas, hair messy from sleep. She saw Dad and smiled shyly, holding up her unicorn toy. "Grandpa, look," she said, clearly trying to show off her favorite thing. Dad barely glanced at her before going back to his speech about Vanessa. Emma's smile faltered and she went back to her room quietly. I watched her go and something in me hardened. I told Dad I wasn't sure I wanted to help with Vanessa's wedding. Not after what happened yesterday. His expression changed instantly. Gone was the calm, reasonable father. He frowned and said, "Don't be petty, Linda. This is bigger than a cake. You know how Vanessa is. She didn't mean it." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked him if he would have said the same thing if someone had ruined Vanessa's wedding cake. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and said, "I really hope you're not planning to hold the family hostage over this." Then he left, slamming my front door so hard the picture frames rattled. That night, Mom called again. This time, she tried a softer approach. She told me she understood why I was upset, but I needed to think about the bigger picture. "You know how your sister is," she said, echoing Dad. "She's always been difficult. But this wedding is her dream, Linda. If the Marriott cancels, she'll never forgive you." I told her it wasn't my responsibility to fix Vanessa's mistakes. There was a pause on the line, and then Mom said something that made my blood run cold. "If you don't step in, your father and I will have to use the savings we were keeping for Emma's future. Is that what you want? For her to miss out on college because you couldn't let go of some cake?" I didn't even know they had savings set aside for Emma. I asked her why they hadn't told me about it before, and she brushed it off, saying it was meant to be a surprise for later, but now apparently it was leverage. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. The next few days were a blur of passive-aggressive group texts and relatives calling me to be the bigger person. My Aunt Caroline sent me a paragraph about family unity. My cousin Jake called to say Vanessa was crying and felt attacked. Vanessa herself didn't bother contacting me directly, but she posted on Facebook about toxic people trying to ruin the happiest day of my life. It didn't take a genius to figure out who she meant. Meanwhile, Emma kept asking when we could have her real birthday cake. I promised her we'd do something special, just the two of us. That weekend, we went to the Sweet Treats Bakery downtown, picked out the biggest chocolate unicorn cake they had, and celebrated in our kitchen with party hats and streamers I put up myself. It was simple, but it made her so happy. Watching her laugh with purple frosting on her face made me realize how long I'd been letting my family's drama dictate my happiness. A few days later, Mom showed up at my house unannounced. She came in looking like she'd been crying, sat down at my kitchen table, and launched straight into her plea. "The Marriott says if we don't pay by Friday, they'll cancel. Your father is furious. Vanessa is devastated. Please, Linda, you're the only one who can stop this. I asked her what Vanessa had said about Emma's birthday. She hesitated, then said she feels bad. I told her that wasn't good enough. If Vanessa wanted my help, she could come over, look me in the eye, and apologize, not just to me but to Emma. Mom didn't like that. She said I was putting conditions on family love. I stayed firm. I told her that love goes both ways. And right now, all I saw was everyone expecting me to sacrifice while Vanessa got whatever she wanted. Mom left looking disappointed. And not even an hour later, I got a text from Vanessa. Stop trying to control everything. It's not my fault your kid can't handle a little disappointment. Pay the Marriott or don't, but stop making this about you. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I screenshotted it and sent it to Mom and Dad with one sentence: "This is what your devastated daughter thinks." Mom didn't reply. Dad sent a single text: "We'll talk later." I knew what that meant. Another confrontation was coming, and I was done backing down. 2 days after Vanessa's text, I came home from my shift at Memorial Hospital to find an envelope taped to my front door. No name, no return address, just my first name scribbled across it in Mom's handwriting. I pulled it off, walked inside, and opened it on the kitchen counter while Emma was in the living room watching Disney Channel. Inside was a folded letter and a bank statement. The letter was short, almost cold. It said that since I had refused to support the family in their time of need, Mom and Dad had decided to withdraw the savings they'd been keeping for Emma and use them to cover Vanessa's wedding balance at the Marriott. The bank statement showed the withdrawal, $15,000. Money I didn't even know existed until last week. Gone. At the bottom of the letter, Mom had written, "We hope you will still come to the wedding and put this ugliness behind us." I stood there staring at the paper, my hands shaking. Emma was in the living room singing along to some cartoon, completely oblivious to the fact that the money meant for her future had just been taken to fund a party she wasn't even excited about attending. My chest felt tight. It wasn't just about the money. It was the audacity. The decision had been made without even asking me, without even a conversation. I called Dad immediately. He picked up on the second ring, sounding annoyed. "I figured you'd call," he said, like this was all just an inevitable step in some plan. I asked him if he really thought it was okay to take money meant for his granddaughter and spend it on Vanessa's wedding. He didn't hesitate. "It's not just Vanessa's wedding, Linda. It's a family event. Emma will benefit too, being part of a happy occasion." I almost laughed because it was so absurd. Emma didn't even understand what was going on, and she'd barely seen Vanessa in the last year because Vanessa never made time for her. Dad's voice turned sharp. "This attitude is exactly why we didn't tell you about the savings sooner. You'd hoard it and make everything about Emma when this is supposed to be about all of us." Hoard it. That word burned. This wasn't hoarding. This was planning for the future of the kid they were supposed to love just as much as Vanessa. But to them, her future was negotiable, a bargaining chip to keep the peace. When I got off the phone, I didn't even realize how hard I'd been gripping the counter until I saw the faint white marks on my knuckles. My phone buzzed again a few minutes later. This time it was Vanessa. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a photo of her in a wedding dress at David's bridal with the caption, "Thanks for finally stepping up. Knew you'd do the right thing eventually." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I went into Emma's room, sat on the edge of her bed, and just watched her play with her Barbie dolls. She looked up at me, smiling, and said, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to make cakes so no one ever throws them away." I felt something in my chest twist, so hard I had to look away. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that letter, that smug text from Vanessa, and Emma's little face when she said that about making cakes. It felt like I was back in high school again, being told to give Vanessa the front seat in the car, to give Vanessa the last piece of pizza, to skip my plans because Vanessa needed a ride. Except this time, it wasn't a slice of pizza. It was my kid's future. A few days later, the betrayal deepened in a way I didn't think was possible. I got a call from Emma's school, Riverside Elementary. Her teacher, Mrs. Thompson, sounded concerned. She said my parents had come by the school earlier that day, saying they were there to pick up their granddaughter early. Apparently, they told the staff that I had approved it, which I hadn't. Luckily, The school called me first to confirm, but the fact that they had tried to take Emma without telling me left me cold. I called Mom immediately. She sounded cheerful, like nothing was wrong. We just wanted to take her shopping for a little flower girl dress for the wedding, she said. You weren't answering your phone at the hospital, so we figured we'd surprise you. I told her flat out she was never to take Emma from school without my permission again. There was a long pause before she said, Linda, you're overreacting. We raised you. We know how to take care of a child. This attitude is why Vanessa says you're becoming impossible to deal with, she added. It was like a switch flipped in my head. Impossible to deal with. That's what they called me when I stopped doing their taxes for free. When I told them I couldn't babysit Vanessa's dog every weekend. When I dared to say no to anything that inconvenienced me. The next day, I got another letter. This one wasn't taped to my door. It was slid under it. Inside was a wedding invitation. My name wasn't on it. Neither was Emma's. The envelope had been addressed to me, but inside it said, Ms. Linda plus guest. No mention of family, no mention of Emma as flower girl or anything else. It was a message, and I got it loud and clear. When I called Mom to ask if it was a mistake, she said Vanessa wanted a sophisticated ceremony. Children make things complicated, she explained. You're welcome to bring a date. Maybe someone special. It's time you moved on and focused on your own life instead of being so wrapped up in Emma. I hung up before I said something that would scorch the earth. I just sat in my quiet townhouse for a long time, staring at that invitation on the coffee table. It felt like my whole life had been leading to this one boiling point. Every slight, every little favor I'd done, every time I'd bitten my tongue for the sake of peace. This was the line. That night, as Emma slept, I opened my laptop and started going through my files. Emails, receipts, copies of text messages. For years, I'd kept records because I was the one who handled family logistics, vacations, shared expenses, even Vanessa's rent once when she'd been between jobs, and dating that guy who turned out to be married. It was all there. Every time I'd bailed her out. Every time I'd quietly paid for something so she wouldn't face consequences. I sat there until 2 a.m., piecing it all together like a puzzle. My anger was cooling into something sharper, something more deliberate. By the time the sun came up, I knew one thing for sure. They might have taken Emma's savings, but they weren't going to take my dignity. Not this time. And that's when Vanessa herself showed up at my door. Vanessa didn't knock. She just stood there on my porch like she'd been waiting for me to open the door. Her arms were crossed and she was wearing that same smug half-smile I'd seen at Chuck E. Cheese. I thought about not letting her in, but before I could decide she said, "Can we talk?" Her tone was casual, like we were discussing weekend plans instead of the fact that she just gutted my trust and used Emma's future savings as her wedding fund. I stepped aside without saying a word and she walked in, glancing around my house like she was checking for dust. She sat down at the kitchen table without being asked, leaned back in the chair, and started scrolling her phone like she wasn't in the middle of detonating what was left of our relationship. So, she said finally, "I hear you're mad." Mad? That word sounded so small compared to what I was feeling. I sat across from her and asked if she had any idea what she'd done to me, to Emma. She looked at me like I was being dramatic and said, "Linda, you're acting like they stole from you. Mom and Dad were just reallocating family resources. And honestly, you should be glad it's going to something meaningful. You can always make more money for Emma's college, but my wedding only happens once." I stared at her, wondering if she really believed what she was saying or if she just enjoyed twisting the knife. She kept talking, explaining how stressful wedding planning had been, how expensive everything was, how she'd had to cut work hours because she needed to be present for dress fittings and cake tastings. The more she talked, the more I realized she didn't see me as her sister. She saw me as a resource, a tool to be used whenever her life got bumpy. When I didn't say anything, she put her phone down and said, "Look, I get that you're hurt, but this isn't just about you. The family needs you to step up. You've always been the responsible one. It's who you are. And let's be honest, Linda, it's not like you had big plans for that money anyway." That last sentence hit me like a punch. I stood up and told her to leave. She acted surprised, like I was overreacting, but when she saw I wasn't joking, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "Fine, just don't ruin the wedding with your mood." Then she walked out, slamming the door so hard my kitchen windows rattled. After Vanessa left, I sat at that table for what felt like hours, staring at the empty chair she'd just been sitting in. It was quiet, too quiet. And that's when it really hit me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was empty, tired, done. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the couch while Emma slept in her room, staring at nothing. The next day at the hospital, my supervisor asked if I was okay because I guess I looked as bad as I felt. I lied and said I was fine, then threw myself into my work like never before. Sometimes staying busy is the only way to keep your sanity. Then came the family group chat. It started with Mom posting a picture of Vanessa's engagement photos, followed by a caption, "So proud of our girl." Counting down the days to the big day. Everyone chimed in with hearts and congratulations. No one mentioned me. No one asked if I was coming to the wedding. No one even said my name. It was like I'd been erased from the family overnight. I quietly left the chat. No announcement, no message, just gone. A few hours later, I got a private text from Mom. "Why would you do that? You're making this harder than it has to be." I didn't reply. Over the next week, the silence from my side must have made them nervous because the phone calls started ramping up. First Mom, then Dad, then Aunt Caroline, then even Grandma Betty from Tampa. Each one delivering their own version of the same lecture: family is everything. Vanessa is sensitive. You need to be the bigger person. Every time I let the calls go to voicemail, I felt a little bit lighter and a little bit lonelier. The real low point came the following Saturday. I had promised Emma we'd go to the playground at Riverside Park, but when we got there, I saw Vanessa and Mom sitting on a bench, sipping Starbucks coffee. They looked up when they saw us, and Vanessa smirked. "Oh, look who finally came out of her cave," she said loudly enough for other parents to hear. Mom didn't say anything, just gave me this look, a look that said I was being ridiculous, that I was the one causing all this tension. Emma wanted to play on the swings, so I let her go while I stood off to the side. I could hear Vanessa talking to Mom about wedding flowers, laughing like none of this mattered. Then Vanessa called out, "Hey Linda. You should smile more. You're going to look miserable in all the wedding photos." I didn't answer. I just took Emma's hand, told her we were going to get ice cream at Dairy Queen instead, and left. That night, I broke down. I sat on the floor of my kitchen after Emma went to bed and just let it all out. Years of being second to Vanessa. Years of swallowing insults. Years of being the family fixer. I cried until I didn't have anything left. And then I just sat there in the dark, staring at the refrigerator. But somewhere in that quiet, something started to shift. The anger that had been boiling finally cooled, and what was left was clarity. They had taken everything they could from me: money, time, emotional energy, and they still wanted more. They wanted me to show up to that wedding, smile, pretend everything was fine, and let Vanessa walk all over me again. I wasn't going to give them that. The next morning, I started taking small steps. I called PNC Bank to open a new account just for me and Emma, separate from anything my parents could access. I spoke to HR at the hospital about setting up an education fund through work, so no one could touch her future again. I went through every shared subscription I had with my parents, the Netflix account, the Amazon Prime, even the Sam's Club membership, and one by one, I removed myself. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. Mom noticed, of course. She called me that evening, furious. "Are you trying to punish us?" she demanded. I stayed calm and told her I was just taking care of my own responsibilities. She accused me of abandoning the family. I didn't argue. I just said, maybe that's what needs to happen. After that, the calls stopped. The silence this time felt different, heavier, but also freeing. One night, I sat down with Emma and told her we might not be going to Aunt Vanessa's wedding. She thought about it for a moment and said, "That's okay, Mommy. Can we have cake that day instead?" I smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks and said, "Yeah, baby. We can have as much cake as you want." And that's when I got the email. An official email from the Marriott itself. It wasn't addressed to me, but I was CC'd, probably by accident. It was a notice of possible cancellation due to a payment dispute and unprofessional communication from the client. I read it twice, my heart thumping in my chest. Vanessa's perfect wedding was about to fall apart. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt a flicker of control again. Not revenge, not yet, just control. I closed my laptop slowly, already feeling the beginning of a plan taking shape in the back of my mind. Something changed in me after that email. For weeks, I had been moving through life like a ghost, weighed down by every insult, every passive-aggressive comment, every time they had made me feel like the problem. But now I had proof that the perfect image they were clinging to, the dream wedding, the family unity they kept throwing in my face, was already crumbling on its own. And for once, I didn't feel powerless. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, made pancakes with Emma, and actually enjoyed breakfast. Not rushed, not distracted, but present. I think she could tell something was different because she kept grinning at me and saying, "You're not sad today, Mommy." I wasn't. When I got to the hospital, I threw myself into my work in a way I hadn't in months. My supervisor noticed and asked if something good had happened. I just smiled and said I was making space for better things. By the end of the week, I had received recognition for excellent patient care that came with a small bonus. It wasn't life-changing money, but it felt symbolic, like life was giving me back some of what had been taken. I used part of that bonus to book a small weekend trip for me and Emma. Nothing fancy, just a cozy cabin at Lake Hartwell, a few hours away. We spent the weekend fishing, making esmeraldas, and eating marshmallows until we were both sticky and laughing. For the first time in months, I didn't think about Vanessa, the wedding, or the family drama. It was just me and my girl, and it felt right. When I got back, my phone was full of missed calls and messages. Mom had sent a long text about how the family was hurting without me, and how I was breaking Vanessa's heart. I read it once, then put the phone down. I didn't reply. Instead, I kept building my life outside of them. I signed Emma up for weekend soccer with the Riverside Rangers and went to every practice, cheering from the sidelines. I started cooking again, experimenting with recipes we could make together. At night, after she went to bed, I worked on a side business I'd been putting off for years, medical consulting I'd always wanted to try, but never had the time or energy to pursue because I was too busy fixing everyone else's problems. As the weeks passed, I felt stronger, calmer, sharper. The constant knot in my stomach started to unwind. Then one day, I got an unexpected email from the Marriott again. This time, it wasn't just a CC, it was sent directly to me. The event coordinator said she knew I was related to the bride and asked if I could help mediate because Vanessa had been unresponsive and difficult during their last interaction. She said the deadline for final payment was approaching and hinted that the venue was seriously considering canceling the reservation if things didn't improve. I stared at that email for a long time. This was it. The moment my family had been waiting for me to swoop in and save them. Only this time, I didn't feel the usual pressure to fix everything. Instead, I wrote back politely, thanked her for the update, and said I was not involved in any financial or planning decisions for Vanessa's wedding. Then I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of sweet tea, and went outside to play hopscotch with Emma. That night, I got a string of frantic texts from Vanessa. "Why would you tell them you're not involved? They think we can't pay now. Do you want my wedding to get cancelled?" I didn't reply. The next day, she sent another message, "Fine. If you want to be selfish about it, just know you're dead to me after this." I sat there reading it, and instead of feeling crushed, I felt free. Like a weight had been lifted. That freedom made me bold. I decided to reclaim my social media, not to avoid them, but to make it mine again. I unfriended family members who had been nothing but drama, archived old photos that brought back bad memories, and posted a single update, a picture of me and Emma at the lake, both of us grinning with the caption, "Best weekend ever." No tags, no context, just us. Within an hour, Aunt Caroline texted, "Looks like someone's finally moving on. Good for you." As my personal life improved, so did my work. My supervisor called me into her office one afternoon and said she was impressed with my recent performance and wanted to recommend me for a charge nurse position that had just opened up. It would mean more responsibility, but also a significant raise and more control over my schedule, which meant more time with Emma. I accepted immediately. When I told Emma about the promotion, she cheered and said, "Does that mean we can get more cake?" I laughed harder than I had in weeks. But not everything was quiet. Mom showed up at my house again a few days later, looking exhausted. She said Vanessa had been calling her non-stop, crying, saying the Marriott was about to cancel because the final payment still hadn't been made. Mom begged me to just cover the balance for the sake of peace. I told her calmly that I wasn't involved and wouldn't be helping. She said, "If this wedding falls apart, Vanessa will never forgive you." I said, "Then I guess she won't forgive me." For once, I didn't feel guilty when she left looking disappointed. That night, I sat down at my laptop and sent one final email to the Marriott coordinator. I thanked her for keeping me informed and let her know that if the booking was cancelled, I would be happy to discuss reserving the venue for a future private celebration. I didn't specify what celebration, just left the door open. The next day, the coordinator replied that as of 5 p.m., no payment had been received from Vanessa. The booking had been cancelled in accordance with the contract terms, and the deposit had been forfeited. She asked if I would still like to discuss a reservation for a future date. I felt this wave of quiet satisfaction wash over me. Not gloating, not petty, just final. That evening, I booked the same date, but not for a wedding. For a private celebration dinner. I didn't give details to my family, just locked it in and paid the deposit myself. Then I sent one single message to the family group chat I had quietly rejoined. Since the Marriott was already reserved for that day, I figured I'd use it. "You're welcome to come if you can be civil." The chat went silent for almost an hour. Then Aunt Caroline replied with a single shocked emoji. Mom finally called. This time I answered. She started crying immediately, saying Vanessa was inconsolable, that this would destroy her reputation. I stayed calm and told her that this was never about destroying anything. It was about finally showing them that I wasn't their safety net anymore. I reminded her of what she had said about taking Emma's college fund for the greater good, and asked if she still thought that was fair now that it had come to this. She didn't answer. Over the next few days, I finalized my plans. Nothing flashy, just a simple dinner for me, Emma, and a few close friends who had been my real support system through this mess. People who actually showed up for us. I arranged for a custom cake to be made, a unicorn cake, just like the one that had been thrown away at Chuck E. Cheese. When the day finally came, it felt almost surreal. I got texts from a few relatives saying they wouldn't be attending because it wouldn't be appropriate, after what happened to Vanessa. Fine. The people who mattered were there. We arrived at the Marriott early, and as soon as Emma saw the cake, her eyes lit up. "You got it back," she shouted.